Samantha sat in the corner booth of the upscale restaurant, nervously checking her phone every few seconds. Her best friend, Julie, had insisted that she try this blind date setup, promising her it would be amazing. But now, sitting alone with a glass of wine, Samantha wasn't so sure. She had spent an hour on her hair, makeup, and outfit, hoping to make a good first impression. Yet, despite her efforts, she couldn't shake the anxious knot in her stomach. Julie hadn't told her much about the guy, just that he was successful, charming, and a total catch. Samantha tried to focus on those words, but when her phone buzzed with a text from Julie that said, "He's on his way," her mind started racing with questions. What if he wasn't her type? What if they had nothing in common? Worse, what if he was, well, not what she was expecting? As the door to the restaurant swung open, Samantha glanced up, scanning the crowd. She saw a tall, muscular man stride confidently into the restaurant. He was wearing a well-tailored suit, and his presence seemed to command the attention of the room. She couldn't quite make out his face from where she sat, but something about him made her heart beat faster. Julie had said her date would be tall. Maybe this was him. The man approached the hostess, spoke for a moment, then turned and made eye contact with Samantha. Her breath caught in her throat. As he walked toward her table, her eyes widened. He was black. Samantha's pulse quickened, and her mind raced in panic. This couldn't be right. Julie hadn't mentioned anything about race, and Samantha felt a flush of discomfort rising up her neck. She wasn't racist, of course, not consciously. But this wasn't what she had expected at all. She had assumed her date would be, well, white, like her. Her whole world felt off balance as the man smiled warmly and approached her table. "Hi, you must be Samantha," he said, his voice deep and smooth. He held out his hand. "I'm Marcus. It's really nice to meet you." Samantha forced a smile, trying to hide her shock as she shook his hand. Yeah, nice to meet you too." She hoped her reaction wasn't obvious, but inside, she was reeling. This wasn't what she'd signed up for. She had envisioned a date with someone she could easily relate to, someone with shared experiences, and someone who would make her feel comfortable. Not someone who would make her feel like she had been thrust into a situation she wasn't prepared for. Marcus didn't seem to notice her discomfort, or if he did, he was polite enough not to mention it. He sat down across from her and started talking, his tone friendly and easygoing. He asked her about her job, her hobbies, her interests, making conversation that would have seemed normal if Samantha hadn't been so caught up in her own internal struggle. She tried to engage, to be polite, but her mind kept wandering. Why hadn't Julie warned her? Was this some kind of joke? She glanced around the restaurant, suddenly hyper-aware of the people sitting at nearby tables. Were they looking at her? Were they judging her for being on a date with a black man? The thought made her feel even more uncomfortable. As Marcus continued talking, Samantha barely registered his words. She was too distracted by her own thoughts, her own discomfort. She nodded when appropriate, smiled when necessary, but her mind was elsewhere, racing with self-consciousness. Then something happened that snapped her out of her mental fog. A man approached their table, his eyes wide with excitement. "Excuse me," the stranger said, almost breathless. "Are you Marcus Collins?" Samantha blinked, confused by the sudden interruption. Marcus looked up, surprised but smiled graciously. "Yes, I am," he replied. The man's face lit up. "I'm a huge fan. Could I get your autograph?" Marcus chuckled. "Of course, man. No problem." As Marcus reached for the napkin the man offered him, Samantha stared in disbelief. The stranger whipped out a pen and eagerly handed it to Marcus, who signed with a flourish. The man thanked him profusely before rushing back to his table, beaming like he had just won the lottery. Samantha's mind spun. Who the hell was this guy? She turned to Marcus, who seemed unfazed by the attention. "I'm sorry, but—" "Who are you?" she asked, genuinely confused. Marcus gave a modest smile. "I play in the NFL," he said casually, as if it were no big deal. "Wide receiver for the Chicago Bears." Samantha's jaw dropped. An NFL player? Before she could fully process the revelation, another person approached their table, a woman this time, with her teenage son in tow. "Excuse me," she said nervously. "My son's a huge fan. Would it be okay if he got a picture with you?" Marcus smiled again, always gracious. "Of course." Samantha watched in stunned silence as Marcus stood up, posed for the photo and chatted briefly with the woman and her son. When they finally left, she realized that other people in the restaurant were starting to take notice, whispering to each other and sneaking glances at their table. She felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her, but this time, it wasn't because she was on a date with a black man. It was because she had been too caught up in her own biases to realize who Marcus really was. As he sat back down, Marcus chuckled softly. "Sorry about that," he said, shaking his head. "Sometimes it gets a little crazy when I'm out in public." Samantha stared at him, dumbfounded. "I had no idea." He shrugged. "I don't really advertise it, you know? I like to keep things low-key when I can." Samantha's mind raced. This man, this NFL player, had shown up to their date with a kind smile and an open heart, while she had spent the entire time worrying about what other people thought. And now, watching the way people flocked to him, the way he handled the attention with humility and grace, she felt a deep sense of regret settling in. Here was a man who had achieved incredible success, a man who had worked hard to get to where he was, and all she had done was judge him the moment he walked in. Samantha felt ashamed, not just for how she had reacted, but for how narrow-minded she had been. Marcus, on the other hand, seemed completely unaware of her inner turmoil. He continued the conversation as if nothing had happened, asking her more about herself, showing genuine interest in getting to know her. His charm, his confidence, and his intelligence were impossible to ignore. And now, knowing who he was, Samantha found herself wanting to know more about him, not because of his fame, but because of who he was as a person. The rest of the evening was a blur of conversation, laughter, and unexpected connections. The awkwardness that had clouded the start of their date slowly melted away as Samantha allowed herself to truly engage with Marcus. She asked him about his career, his life outside of football, and his experiences growing up. She found herself laughing at his stories, charmed by his humility, and the warmth in his eyes. By the time dessert arrived, Samantha realized she was enjoying herself more than she had on any date in recent memory. Marcus was not only successful, but kind, intelligent, and thoughtful, and she had almost thrown it all away because of her own preconceived notions. As they left the restaurant, Marcus offered to walk her to her car. The night air was cool, and Samantha found herself feeling lighter than she had in hours. "Thank you for tonight," she said, looking up at him. "I had a great time." Marcus smiled. "Me too? Maybe we can do it again sometime?" Samantha nodded, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "I'd like that." As Marcus turned to leave, Samantha watched him go, feeling a mixture of excitement and lingering guilt. She had judged him before she even knew him, and now she realized how wrong she had been. Marcus wasn't just the black guy she had been nervous about. He was a remarkable man who had given her the best date she'd had in years. Samantha sighed, shaking her head at herself. She had almost missed out on something incredible because of her own insecurities. But as she got into her car, she couldn't help but smile. Grateful for the second chance she'd been given to see Marcus for who he really was. Sometimes, life had a funny way of showing you what really mattered. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I put a lot of love and care into telling these important stories, and your support means the world to me. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Have a blessed day.